Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. In this episode, the latest on the Bryan Kohberger case, the Goncalves family is now suing Washington State University. Kaylee Goncalves, of course, one of the victims from the Bryan Kohberger murders. Bryan Kohberger was attending Washington State University, getting his PhD in criminology, and now Kaylee Goncalves' family is suing them. There were warning signs that Kohberger was troubled while he was in college there, but does that rise to the level of a lawsuit? I'm digging into it in this episode of Bryan Enton Investigates. Hey guys, so I have confirmed that the Goncalves family, and perhaps other families too, but I've confirmed that the Goncalves family is going to be suing Washington State University. Washington State University, of course, is where Bryan Kohberger was getting his doctorate degree in criminology. I had heard rumblings for a while that some of the families were considering suing WSU, Washington State University, but I've now confirmed it. And I'm waiting for more details, and I haven't seen the actual lawsuit yet, but this is the statement that I got from Shannon Gray, who is the attorney who has been representing the Goncalves family. And it says, we filed this lawsuit to seek accountability and transparency from Washington State University. Our goal is to understand what went wrong, to ensure that no other family endures the same tragedy, and to honor the memory of those who were lost. We trust the legal process to uncover the truth, and we will not be making further public comments while this case is pending. So they're keeping it pretty basic with their statement, but saying they want to ensure that no other family endures the same tragedy and that they want to honor the memory of those who were lost. So that's the official statement from the family, and that's all that I know officially from them. What I can say is it seems the reason that they would want to sue Washington State University is because there were students and staff at Washington State University who had expressed concern about Bryan Kohberger. Whether that rises to the level of a lawsuit and for the Goncalveses to be able to say, well, Washington State University, you could have done more, you could have kicked Bryan Kohberger out sooner, you could have fired him, you could have made him leave, and if you had done that, these murders wouldn't have happened. Whether they can actually prove that in a court of law, I guess we'll see. But it seems that is the reason that they are suing. And I want to go through some of these police reports. Remember, I'm going to use my phone as my light. It's kind of dark out where I am right now. But remember there was that document dump of, I think it was like almost 1,500 pages of police reports from Idaho State Police. This was like, I think it's been like more than a month now. I remember because I printed them all out at like the FedEx store just because I wanted to have copies of them all. But within that big stack of police reports were a ton of reports from students at Washington State University and also staff who police had interviewed getting information about Bryan Kohberger. And I would assume that those reports are part of the basis of this lawsuit. And I'm going to go through, so I went through like all those reports again, and I went back and found all the ones that were connected to Washington State University, which I'm going to go through them again with you in a second just to remind you. And I would assume that at this point, the lawyers representing the families now suing, or family just, I just know of the Goncalves right now. I would assume that these police reports are part of the reason they decided to sue. And also remember that when you sue, there's a discovery process, which means that you are able to request information, subpoena information, interview people, and a lot of information can come out through those channels. For example, remember with the Gabby Petito story, even when it was all over and we knew that Brian Laundrie's parents, Gabby Petito's boyfriend, the one who murdered her, his parents were not being charged, Gabby's family sued the Laundries, the parents, and they were able to get new information because of that lawsuit that never even came out during the criminal investigation that we knew of. Remember the burn after reading letter, the fact that the Laundries had hired the attorney, the criminal attorney, early on. Like, all of that information came out because of the lawsuit. So it could be that the Goncalves family also is doing this just to get more info out of WSU to find out what they really knew behind the scenes, although a lot of it is in these police reports already. So let me go through here and just remind you of some of these police reports again. So this one is from a staff member, and most of these interviews are, Idaho State Police went back and interviewed these people after the arrest was made to go get information about Bryan Kohberger. So this is from a staff member. They said that Kohberger would hang out in the hallways, and a lot of it's redacted, would hang out in the hallways of blank and her office, described Kohberger as creepy, and he would simply stand at her desk and stare at her or her coworkers. At one stage, blocking the coworker in her desk area. He would also follow them out of their cars at the end of the day. His continued behavior resulted blank arranging blank to meet at 1700 hours after work to escort them to their cars. So this staff member was so concerned about Bryan Kohberger at WSU that that they wanted someone to escort them to their cars. Said complaints from faculty members, administration staff, and other students were referred to the blank. These complaints referenced his rude and belittling behavior toward women and his unprofessional, rude dealings with his blank. This resulted in a mandatory training class for all graduate students regarding behavior expectations. She said during Kohberger's attendance at this class, he sat at the back with his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. And then this staff member said there was a total of 9 complaints that had been filed against Kohberger at WSU. So that was from one staff member. This is a graduate student who was also working in the same program, fellow colleague of Kohberger. She was also working on a project with Kohberger, and said that Kohberger really liked to discuss research and he liked to dominate the conversations. She described him standing in the doorway and hovering. She said she never felt uncomfortable around him. He had a macho demeanor about him and would appear to be puffed up. The only thing she felt was off about Kohberger was his intense stare. He would intensely stare at people even when he wasn't having a conversation with that person. She went on to say she was aware of an issue he had with a blank student. He was perceived by female classmates as dominant and disrespectful to female instructors. At one point, blank had come into her office crying because of a classroom discussion Kohberger was having with her blank. His behavior could be described as possibly sexist. He really did not like to be interrupted. Went on to say she did recall one other staff pulled her aside and made her aware of a possible issue with him stalking another member of the staff. So this is where we could be entering the terrain again where this would be important to a lawsuit. The fact that there were allegations of him stalking another student of the staff, member of the staff. An incident took place where he asked out the other staff member and had followed that individual out to her car. A report was filed with the Office of Civil Rights. There's a lot of reports here, which again just goes back to there was real issues at WSU. Blank contact, this is a different person. The homicide tip line to report she had observed Kohberger with bloody knuckles. She saw the knuckles just prior to the homicides. This was another student, I believe. Recalled Kohberger talking constantly during the classes. He would pick fights with other classmates. She described an argument where someone left the class upset. She had heard he had an incident with a female professor where Kohberger disagreed with the grade he had been given. Kohberger went to a male professor to complain about the grade. The female professor, she described Kohberger as weird, but he had never threatened her. In one instance after class, Kohberger and her were alone. When she was trying to leave the classroom, he blocked her exit. She described him blocking her with his physical stance. Kohberger said they should meet up sometime and talk about her professional career. And so she said that he actually blocked her, which is kind of creepy. This is another student who said she invited the whole cohort to her apartment during the second week of school, or third week. Said it was a football game they wanted to all watch. Kohberger attended the event, but was about 2.5 hours late. About a week after the event, Kohberger began to tell others that blank takes blank for blank, and she suspected Kohberger may have looked in her bathroom cabinet and observed her prescriptions because she does not openly share this with others. So this person is alleging that Kohberger came to her place for a party, that she invited him and the other classmates to a party, and that he snooped through her bathroom and then told everybody what prescription medicine she was on. She said her interactions with Kohberger, after that she began to distance herself from him, heard complaints from other female graduate students about how Kohberger would make them uncomfortable. Said as the semester progressed, there were numerous interactions with Kohberger, staring at students weirdly during class and spatially trapping fellow students in the students' offices, and that's the words they use, spatially trapping, which is kind of strange. Stated when she was not around, Kohberger would spatially trap blank in their offices for long periods of time. Blank stated that there was a spiff during class between blank and Kohberger in which Kohberger was mansplaining to blank. Said as the disagreement progressed, blank had the class move on from the topic. So just more issues here with Kohberger in class, and you'll see there's more reports too of him like blocking people in offices, which is interesting. During questioning about Kohberger's overall performance in school, she stated that she did not think Kohberger was doing very well. That she didn't think his grades were doing very well. Provided examples regarding Kohberger blocking fellow students in their offices. Showed us an email from blank that said, "Help me, this convo is weird." Said that Kohberger would stand in doorways, not leave when it was clear based on the social cues that the person in the office was packing up and waiting to leave. Said she was aware of a formal complaint to Human Resources by blank for statements Kohberger made to her after blank had stepped away. As a result of the complaint, a meeting took place regarding discrimination and harassment as a department. Blank thought the meeting occurred sometime in October or November and could not retrieve the exact date. Blank said blank is hard of hearing and has 2 interpreters. So this is interesting. So there was even a complaint to HR. So again, when you think about a lawsuit, these are the kinds of things I would assume they're going to go back and dig into here. So this is another professor that police interviewed, advised due to legal restrictions placed on staff that they were only able to provide answers due to questions in general terms and not with direct specificity. So this is kind of interesting. So even when police went and tried to talk to staff members, there are some of them who didn't want to give details because remember there's this thing, I think it's called FERPA, where privacy of students and their grades and certain aspects of their education are private, almost like HIPAA. Which seems kind of strange in this situation that would be part of all of this, that they wouldn't want to talk to the police. But one faculty member actually said that, there'd be things that she wasn't able to say because of what she called legal restrictions. And said that she was in receipt of 13 reports pertaining to Kohberger highlighting concerns regarding his behavior. Reports regarding his behavior. So there were documented reports here. And keep in mind, we haven't seen those reports. We have these police reports from when police went and talked to his co-workers and classmates, but we haven't actually seen the reports. Something that also in a lawsuit they would probably be able to get, which is probably another reason they're doing this lawsuit. Talking more about Kohberger's demeanor in class, how he didn't get along with fellow students. Didn't want to give too many details to this faculty member, but it acknowledged that there were reports. This is another faculty member. He would stand at her desk, including behind her, staring over her shoulders as she worked and stare at her. This is actually another student, I think. She noted that the professor was asked to escort blank to her car at the end of the workday as Kohberger's behavior was of concern. So this isn't just like a creepy guy in class. This behavior became so concerning for some of these students that they actually wanted to be escorted out to their cars because of Bryan Kohberger. So it's interesting. And so police are, in this police report, police were trying to get more information from this faculty member, and they suggested that a subpoena should be provided to WSU in order to release any records held by blank department relating to these reports or matters. He further recommended investigators should review WSU's executive procedure. So this faculty member wasn't given up their reports, those specific reports. Again, back to this lawsuit, I'm assuming the Goncalves family wants to see these reports. And just like with Gabby Petito's family, there were reports they were not able to get until they actually filed a lawsuit. And then you are entitled through discovery to get these things. So here's an example of something right here that we haven't been able to see. All of these actual complaint reports against Kohberger. This is another student who said she tried to remain civil when speaking to Kohberger, but he felt he needed to be aggressive and upfront, specifically with female colleagues. Said Kohberger engaged in unsolicited debates and arguments regarding topics that she felt were not up for debate. Explained an incident in class where the topic of eyewitness misidentification was being discussed, was explaining her viewpoints due to her background on the topic. Kohberger was agitated, argumentative, because he did not agree with her explanation. Explained she filed a written complaint to the WSU Civil Rights and Compliance Group regarding the mansplaining incident, said her goal was to create documentation of the incident should further issues arise. Should further issues arise. Did WSU have an obligation to do more when these complaints started coming in? I don't know the answer to that, but again, goes back to the basis of this lawsuit that the Goncalves family says is going to be filed. This student said that she did not interact with Kohberger outside of campus, with the exception of a party at an apartment he attended for an hour. Recalled another department gathering at Paradise Creek Brewery, said Kohberger had a bottle of wine to himself and seemed to focus his attention on a female server. And just sort of more creepy behavior. This fellow student said there was a tally board in her office memorializing the number of times Kohberger was late to class, and one to show the number of times Kohberger made discriminatory comments and behaviors to the cohort members. So it got to the point where they actually had a tally board in an office keeping track of the amount of times that Kohberger was offending some of these classmates. Said she saw Kohberger with injuries to his left hand. This is interesting. This doesn't really have much to do with the lawsuit, I don't think. But they did talk about seeing injuries to his hand after the murders, which I've gone over before in videos. I mean, there's a ton of police reports here from students. Various complaints about Kohberger. This person spoke to other staff and students. His stating about spoken discriminatory comments, which were homophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic in nature. He would also stare at people and stand uncomfortably close to lean over women, making them very uncomfortable, according to this report. This faculty member says she was informed by staff and had talked to Kohberger as many as 5 times about his behavior. So there were a lot of warning signs here. After about the 3rd meeting, Kohberger did not come into the office as much to socialize, would see Kohberger in the hallway, and said he would corner her and attempt to conversate. They'd try not to engage with him. Recounted an instance in which her neighbor saw someone very close outside her window and told Blank to make sure to lock the door. Blank did not know who the person was, but learned she lived fairly close to Kohberger. Blank learned from professors that Kohberger was fired as a teacher's assistant after the fall 2022 semester. So this person was so concerned about Kohberger that when there was someone creepy outside their window, she even thought that maybe it was Kohberger, but apparently didn't have any proof. I mean, there was a lot going on with these people talking about Kohberger and having issues with Kohberger. Kohberger came into a room, sat in a chair, but nobody acknowledged him. When he realized this, he became angry and stormed out. Described Kohberger as very angry, built up with fury and rage. They made a report about that. A lot of similar stuff here. This one says Kohberger had a reputation, quote, for being a dick, is the way it's described. The following examples are complaints that this other classmate had heard about Kohberger. He was disrespectful towards his professors. He instigated contentious arguments in class. He expressed concern over the other classmates and a hearing disability. He only talked back to or criticized female professors and students and was sexist. He thinks highly of himself and doesn't interact well with other people. Lingering in an office. Someone didn't want to leave Kohberger alone with another student, so they hung around. When Kohberger was in one student's office, another woman emailed that student. When I say students in offices, it's because they're grad students, so they had offices. Someone emailed with the subject line stating 911, asking if the other student needed anything because they were alone in the room with Kohberger. Oh my gosh. Kohberger was awkward, talked a lot. A lot of just similar stuff over and over again from different students. Someone else noticed a bandage on Kohberger's middle finger. That doesn't really, I don't think, have much to do with the lawsuit, but I had highlighted a lot of these last time I went through them. I mean, there's so much. It's so much of the same stuff. This student says Kohberger would try and talk to her about Ted Bundy murders because he knew she was interested in the true crime. Also name-dropped a former professor of his, who I think is Catherine Ramsland, who I've interviewed. I'm going to get to her interview in a second. Another student said that they would keep track of Kohberger's behavior in class, made an informal report to blank, but she didn't like the way they responded because she felt they could not adequately protect her from retaliation. Said she continued to report her experiences to blank as well blank, the program chair, and other professors about feeling unsafe. She said she recently wrote a graduate questionnaire that she continued to feel targeted and didn't know how to handle the situation. So again, there's a lot of documentation against Kohberger. One time in November, she found Kohberger in her office. She felt uncomfortable and left. Seems like he was in a lot of the women's offices, making them feel uncomfortable. Again, similar, people feeling uncomfortable, him intimidating them, offended a woman in class, condescending manner. This is interesting. Said she had never met anyone who acted in such a condescending manner and wondered why people in power in the department did not address his behavior. The way he spoke to females in the department was unsettling to them. So there is concern here from students who feel like WSU wasn't doing enough at that time. Again, whether that rises to the level of a lawsuit by the Goncalves family, I don't know. But I would imagine this is all what sparked them to file a lawsuit. So this woman says there are a few times weird things happened around that time, believes they were probably unrelated. She was home alone one night, changing in her room, and someone knocked on the window. She called her husband, and he came home from work. Another time, after she had started working at blank, she heard someone moving around on her porch. Her husband came home and saw a white car leaving the area, which is interesting. We know Bryan Kohberger had a white car. Both occurrences were in August or September. So you think they're going back to these students now after the murders, after the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, and women are coming up with these stories like, oh, there was someone outside my window. I saw a white car moving away. I mean, a lot of really creepy stuff. And again, a lot of this is like repetitive, but over and over again, it's women feeling nervous about his behavior, making complaints about Kohberger. Some of these are directing police to other people. People said that they were debating whether Kohberger was just power tripping or socially inept. I mean, there's so many of these. I didn't even bring them all with me because some of them were just so repetitive. Said his interactions with Kohberger, this is a male student, he never discussed his home, family, or friends, but did discuss his educational experience. Again, talked about a professor of forensic psychology and criminal justice who had written many notable books and articles on serial killer BTK. So he sort of like bragged about knowing Dr. Catherine Ramsland. Dr. Ramsland is a woman who I know who is a professor at DeSales University in Pennsylvania, where Kohberger got his undergraduate degree, and she was actually his advisor. Someone described Kohberger as focused but arrogant, wanted all of his classmates to know he was the smartest guy in the room. So those are just some of the examples there, and I thought it was important to go through them again now that we can confirm that the Goncalveses are filing this lawsuit against WSU, just to give you an idea of why they may be filing the lawsuit. So you heard me mentioning Dr. Catherine Ramsland a couple of times there. She was not a teacher at WSU, but she was a teacher at DeSales University in Pennsylvania, where he was getting his master's. And I interviewed her. I think I really had like the only interview or one of a handful of interviews with her about Kohberger. For a long time, she didn't want to discuss Kohberger because she was trying to respect the criminal justice process and thought that she might be called as a witness. But then when there was no trial and there was the plea deal, she did talk to me. And he didn't have this kind of reputation in Pennsylvania, it doesn't seem, at DeSales University. And I think that's partly because a lot of the classes were online, and this was very intensive in person. So that could be one of the reasons. Another reason could be because, in Pennsylvania, he lived with his parents, and he was on his own at Washington State University. So I don't know if that may have impacted his whole demeanor, but I wanted to replay for you, just because I think it ties back to all of this, my interview with Dr. Ramsland. And again, remember, this is not her experience at Washington State University because she's not a professor there. So everything I just said, this is Washington State University. This interview is about her experience with him in Pennsylvania.
How did you first meet Bryan Kohberger? What classes of yours was he in?
Okay, I want to be just clear that I'm still within the FERPA limitations that protect students and student information. So I will talk within that. I met him in the fall of 2018 when he came to DeSales University. He had an associate's degree, and he was going to get into our 4-year program as a psychology major. He selected the forensic track, which made him an advisee for me because I managed the forensic track. And he was also in my class that semester.
And Dr. Ramsland talks about FERPA. I should have mentioned that. There's a law, it's a federal law, I believe, that she is not allowed to talk about certain aspects of a student, their grades, certain parts of their academic life. It's almost like a HIPAA. So she's going to tell us what she can, but unless Bryan Kohberger signs off, she's legally not allowed to talk about certain elements of his academic career. So just keep that in mind if there's some things that Dr. Ramsland can't answer. What was your perception of him?
He seemed like eager to be in the classroom. He was polite. He was respectful, intense, and curious. And there was no reason for me to think that he was anything other than someone who was really interested in this potential career.
Was there anything looking back now that was strange about him or that you noticed?
When I look back, there really isn't anything that stood out to me. I think when you're a teacher, your instinct is to accept students at face value. You don't, start with suspicions or, and there really weren't any red flags. He was always really quite respectful and grateful. He would thank me for things. He was attentive. He would do the work. I didn't have any concerns.
I think it was 4 classes that you taught him in. What were those classes?
There were 3 undergraduate courses in the forensic track that I taught, and he was in all of them. Well, one was Introduction to Forensic Psychology. Another was my death investigation class, which was called Psychological Sleuthing. And the third one was called Dangerous Minds, the Psychology of Antisocial Behavior. And then he got into the graduate program in criminal justice for a master's degree. And he took a course with me called behavioral criminology.
Is there anything, Dr. Ramsland, when you look back and you think about the curriculum of those classes, and not getting into his specific experience, but when you think about what you taught in those classes, that you think, oh my gosh, he may have used that in what he's now accused of doing here in Idaho?
Well, the antisocial behavior course involves serial killers and mass murderers, and we do a lot of case analysis. I use two books that I wrote. One was written with the BTK killer, whom you just mentioned, and his decision process and the crimes and how he thought about them and felt about them, and what was it like for him, to be caught. So that's a very intense book. And also I have one called The Mind of a Murderer, which was about various behavioral experts over the past century who interviewed killers, mass murderers, and serial killers to get as close as possible, spending a lot of time with them to get as close as possible to their process of becoming a criminal. And so he would have been exposed to that. I think now looking back, I would look at maybe some of the things that interested him as being, something that gives me pause. But we always have to think about, we all know, everyone in this field, forensic psychology and criminology, know that we could have students who might become offenders. But we also know that the vast majority of our students will not, and will instead go into a field like law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, that make the world better, that protect us. So we know that there's always a risk that we're attracting somebody who wants to do something terrible. Hoping we won't ever have that, but in my case, I did.